Today's session is titled Infrastructure, Smart Infrastructure, Building the Future. We have an esteemed panel, movers and shakers in the industry. The combined experience is self-admittedly maybe over 100 years. 100 years? Yeah, we won't say who's what, but a lot of experience here. So today we're going to talk about what's going on in the industry, real time, on the field, what are the challenges, trends. We're going to touch on topics like diversity, inclusion, equity, privacy. Smart cities and smart infrastructure should really be about people first. All the things around sustainability and energy is really for people, right? And so those are common themes that are going to be spoken throughout the session. We only have 40 minutes, which is why in our preparation, we decided not to show slides so you can focus strictly on the conversation at hand. And maybe towards the end, if you have pressing questions, we'll take a few questions from the audience as well. But without further ado, let me introduce our wonderful panel here. So Jeff Hendler is co-founder and CEO of Logical Buildings. You want to put your hand up, say hi? Round of applause. Well, let's get the energy going.
Louder.
We have Scé Pike, head of multifamily at ADT. I've been seeing a lot of ads about ADT smart cities, so I think you can bring a great perspective. And to my left here, Marco Argenton, VP of Product Management at Telit. And you're from Italy? Yeah. Italy, great. And we have a truly international panel here. And Karen Lightman, at my far left here, Executive Director of Metro 21, based at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. So I'm Michael Donhan, I'll be the moderator, and I'm the co-founder and president of RePure. We're a healthy buildings OS provider, and it's today's panel. So to set the stage for our discussion and to provide our audience here with a view to the perspective that you bring with smart infrastructure, why don't we start with Jeff? What does this title of this panel mean to you?
Yeah. Smart infrastructure, first it's happening. So the title, I think, it's not building the future is now. This is actually happening in the field. Buildings are becoming more interconnected, wireless, they're dispatchable, and it's opening up a lot of business models to drive decarbonization, electrification, these big energy transition themes that we'll be discussing today.
Great. Scé?
Yeah, I think one of the titles is just so spot on. And I think a lot of you guys in the audience are either from small companies or large companies and are here because you want to understand what does this mean? What does smart infrastructure mean? But with the economic challenges that we're about to face as well, everybody's talking about this recession. So what is the opportunity for us to build the future right now? And I'm going to tell you this, I was there at Palm during the Great Recession, right? When 2006, everything started going sideways. And then at 2007, June, iPhone came out. September 2008, Android came out. And this is one of the things that's really interesting to me, that during these times of recession is the true creative destruction time when you can actually build the future. And so I was so excited to be on this panel because of the title and the opportunity that we have to watch old industries kind of not disintegrate, but fall down. That allows for opportunities to reinvent or invent, and really for you all in the audience to be able to participate in building the future. So I'm glad that it's a crowd that we can have an actual conversation with.
Great. So the takeaway is amidst widespread challenges, be bold, right? It's a great opportunity to make an impact. Let's go to Marco. What does smart infrastructure building the future mean to you?
Well, to me and to Telit Centurion, at the end, smart infrastructure is really the backbone of smart cities, right? And at the end, we don't sometimes realize how the technologies are really sometimes unnoticeable, but really present and popping up in different use cases. And developing products in the IoT space, for us, it's really an exciting moment, being able to be an enabler of such solutions. And I delivered several speeches in the past talking about collecting data at the edge, smart sensors, all this kind of stuff. But back then, it was more kind of a PowerPoint technology. But as my colleagues here said, we at Telit now really believe that it's now the moment to build the future with those technologies. And if I ask the audience what a smart city is, probably the mental image that people have is something like, a futuristic movie, right? But reality is really among us and is becoming really something that we can leverage.
Wonderful, thank you. Karen, I mean, you're based in Carnegie Mellon, a great institution, and you work with a lot of the government entities and private companies. Can you tell us what building the future means to you in your capacity there?
Yeah, this is great, and thank you for being here. And it's great to be back at CES again. And I think that just kind of echoing some of the same thoughts is, in my opinion, because Carnegie Mellon focused on automation and artificial intelligence, it's not a technology issue. I think that's the challenge with when we're talking about smart cities and smart infrastructure. We have the technology. It's been invented. It's been demonstrated. We've had pilot projects. I've worked on over 60 pilot demonstration projects of using smart infrastructure and technologies, and we can show that it happens. Where it gets complicated is in the people and the procurement, and in order to, and the policies, right? The 3 Ps, and getting it out of just the demonstration and making it more scalable and integrated. And oftentimes that is an issue related to the people and the policies and the procurement that really are not as progressive, another P. So I think that's the piece that we have to really focus on, is what can we do to make those demonstration projects. In the speaker room, we were talking about, do we have the technology here in terms of smart cities in the United States? Yeah, we're definitely we're the best. We have it all. Carnegie Mellon, lots of other, maybe MIT, and some others have the technology, but Europe is actually kicking our butts in this area because they are able to work together and they can build those coalitions and have the funding to help support that. So I'm hoping that with this Infrastructure Investment Act and the funding that's coming to the states, that can inspire some of this coalition building and this public-private partnership. And folks like you to step up and affect that change, because otherwise we're just going to create more and more silos, and that is going to be, we're going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's a big issue as well.
Wonderful. So one of the things we've discussed prior to CES is data. Everyone here understands that you can't manage what you don't know, which is why data is so key. So it's clearly enabling the visions that we're describing here. The next question I have for our panel is, how is data powering the present course and future possibilities to achieve smart infrastructure? And I'm going to go back to you, Karen, because this is where your forte is.
Thank you. And I think that's the issue as well, is that we've created so many silos. And so the data may be there, but it's maybe it's in a spreadsheet, or it's in a PDF, or it's on someone's laptop. When you're talking about municipalities and small, medium municipalities, maybe big cities like New York City are doing a better job. Boston's doing a great job in looking at data. But I think the incentive needs to be, we need to have that transparency. And at the same time, it needs to be safe and secure. So you're talking about edge computing, that we've got to have more of that, where not everything is being sent to the cloud and smart decisions are being made at the edge, and that we also at the same time are building trust. And so I'm part of the World Economic Forum. I'm the co-chair of the Trustworthy IoT Coalition, and it's so critical that if we're going to affect change using this IoT, this sensors everywhere and everything's connected, and the vision that a lot of my colleagues are talking about, we've got to have the trust of the community, and you've got to earn that trust. And right now there's a lot of tech lash, and there's a lot of concern about privacy and who owns it and who has access, because the monetization of that data has been, squandered. The trust has been lost. And so I think we have a really great opportunity with using technologies like edge computing to help address that change.
I'm going to ask someone else to chime in here. How do you enforce that privacy and allow people to have agency?
So I could chime in on this one. So as ADT, one of the things that we do is through security, safety. ADT is a well-recognized brand in the US, and it's immediately a trustworthy brand, right? And coming into a very new area of focus into buildings, multifamily is my personal focus, and as head of multifamily, we have to engage with renters, but we sell to owners, right? And most of real estate, by the way, it's a $3 trillion industry that's completely turning over. It's the last old industry, right? Left over from like finance has turned over, healthcare has turned over, automotive has turned over to become digital. Real estate, 10% of GDP is finally now going, hey, we got to do things differently. Real estate is the building infrastructure world, right? And right now we're going in and making that smart and secure. One of the things that we are very mindful of is that most of real estate is owned by very, very large institutions, because real estate is a financial asset class. So it's owned by BlackRock, Blackstone, big asset managers. But we have to protect the renters who live there. And so we actually allow for the renters to delete their data. They can choose to delete on a day, 30 days, year, month, et cetera, if they want to. Most don't choose to. Most don't actually care. We actually went and surveyed the renters. They're like, no, if it makes my life better, I don't care. And so this is one of the things that is like a juggling act, because for us, it is useful to understand how people live and how we can make that better for them, right? So, but you do also have to give the choice of that. One thing I would say is that you're from Italy. GDPR is a fascinating one for me, where in some ways, Europe kind of gave over the rights of privacy to the big organizations, the Right to be Forgotten Act, right? And they said, hey, Google, you now have to choose whether or not that person has the right to be forgotten, and give jurisdiction rights in some ways to Google or Facebook or Amazon, which is really fascinating as well. Right. So it's a really hard case, I think, to go through.
Yeah. Marco, can you give us a European perspective on privacy?
Well, but first of all, I wanted to connect to a few keywords that I just heard from my colleagues here, and they mentioned monetization, security, and privacy. But starting from monetization, this reminds me that in the industrial modern age, we are used to have this way of saying that cash is king, right? And now in the digital age, data is taking the crown from cash, right? And we building products that are collecting data, transmitting data. We recognize at Telit that we are becoming the custodians in a way of a lot of private, personal, and business information. So at the end, privacy is important, but even before talking about privacy, security, I think, is even more important, right? In all the transactions that are happening, and people sometimes don't realize how the data are managed and stored, and we are not just an enabler of technological solutions. We have to keep this in mind. And for example, with the recent acquisition of the Thales Interion product line with enhanced security solutions, we really demonstrate how focused we are on this topic, right?
Can I add one more thing? I'm sorry.
Sure. Jeff, you're coming up next. So.
Sorry about that. But one of the things that's really interesting from an IoT perspective, and you're the connectivity, you're like the river that we all run on, right? But there's all these different boats on that river, and we all have a little piece of what is your life. Like, let's say your data is scenery. We're all seeing that same scenery, but we're all in this boat. And it's IoT so disparate, right? Everybody's getting a little picture of your data. So I think we, as a industry pioneers, defining the future, really need to make the conscious choice to do the right thing. Right? Because it's not going to come down to, honestly, jurisdiction. It's not going to come down to, I don't think, at this in the stage, like the government stepping in.
That's why transparency is so important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is where it's so hard to manage privacy in this world.
Right. So just as we are today, we spend, studies show, over 90% of our lives in buildings. So exercise I like to do is take your age times 90%, that's the amount of time you spend indoors. And so the indoor environment, whether it's your health, whether it's so many other factors, how does it contribute to our lives, or how does it impact our quality of lives? So the next question I'm going to let you start off, Jeff, is what technologies are you paying attention to, and what impact do you foresee it having on smart infrastructure and improved quality of life?
Sure, great. And a good segue is buildings. My company's Logical Buildings. So very holistic, looking at the real estate industry to help them decarbonize and make value out of that. You know, we have our formula for success, our E equals MC squared, which will answer the question, is AMI plus IoT minus CO2 equals lots of dollar signs. Okay, so people in this room should like kind of identify with one of those acronyms. In the energy world, everything's 3-letter acronyms, so you have to get used to that. So AMI, automated meter infrastructure. Every day, every moment, another utility is putting in a smart meter. Why? They need to. It's giving data access to the end user to enable them to be responsive with the load they're creating, their digital content of carbon, of energy, and being able to measure it and manage it. That's the trend. It's happening globally. IoT is the ability to take information from all these smart devices, the smart infrastructure. Easy ones, smart thermostat. Now we start to see, you know, EV charging being managed, because that has an impact on your grid and on your carbon. And being able to manage that time of use and understand that with the electric market in this electrification move that we're all seeing happening, that reduces CO2, that reduces cost. But most importantly, as a business model to get real estate companies to adopt this, there's green of bottom line. There's NOI, there's net operating income, there's net asset value. That, you know, the BlackRocks, the Avalon Bays, Equity Residentials, who are clients of ours, see. And, you know, they see that their residents are able to participate in that. And they see that's what they call ESG. There's a social engagement that residents now could play a role in this decarbonization. There's a shift of the power now behind the meter to a person. And that's like really socially gratifying to see that happening.
Right. And so we were talking behind the scenes, and I think the challenge is that it really depends on your electric company. So not all electric companies, not all public utility commissions that are regulating this at the state level are created equal. And so we have challenges where that's not true. That's not true in the state of Pennsylvania. And it's not. I'll give you an example. So I've been working with the city of Pittsburgh and helping them do their LED light conversion. 40,000 streetlights that are some owned by the public utility, some owned by the city of Pittsburgh. Yeah. And they don't know where they're all located. And they negotiated the per pole rate, not depending on how much energy is being used. So part of the holdup is figuring out and changing laws so that they can be incentivized to use less electricity. So,
yeah. No,
it sounds, I think the challenge is, I'm going to push you, it's like, all this sounds great, but then when the rubber hits the road and you want to do this and you want to incentivize things in buildings and in the street, it's a lot more complicated and messy, because you're looking at old infrastructure in cities that are, born. Pittsburgh was founded in 1789. Our infrastructure is super old. Europe, Italy, Turin, much older, right?
Yeah. I would say that the good news is that across
okay, fine.
The good news is that the model's already there in a wholesale market and for the commercial rate classes, and now it's happening at the residential level in New York and California and
Texas.
Come
to Pittsburgh.
Chicago.
Yeah.
But the fact that on the commercial level, there already is insight of the value, even in Pittsburgh, to manage your capacity in PJM, which is a wholesale market construct. There are buildings doing that, and so they learn. So those real estate owners have those buildings that know there's 5 hours, during the summer that they have to, shift their load. They already become trained in that. So when it happens, and when Duquesne and others enable that for the residents like you see in New York and California, Texas, and it's happening slowly because that's a trend. That mindset's there, that training's there, and that's what we're seeing in New York, California, and Texas, is that transfer from commercial class to residential, which is that social equity play that's happening.
Yes, and to add a little bit to that, because I think we both work with real estate quite a bit, the other aspect is not just the energy. So when you're kind of focused on energy, we're focused on safety and security and solar and insurance. I mean, ADT has a lot of hands, their hands in a lot of different areas that we really can bring together and really push the future vision by creating this, excuse me, a lifestyle, a building OS, or what we would call a living profile. But in addition to what we're seeing with building owners, because they're doing some interesting things, like we have a customer that built the solar farm in a empty lot, and they essentially feed the utility companies, and then they get a deal on their building, miles away, that they get like free energy for like 10 to 15 years on that building. And then there's other aspects of it where they rather monitor their usage, not so much for energy saving purposes, but to make sure that their pipes don't burst. Right now we have this polar freeze that comes every winter, or now the atmospheric river, right? So they're monitoring leaks, flooding, black mold, and making sure that the air comes on in areas like Houston to make sure that black mold doesn't happen. They want to make sure that up in Dakotas that the pipes don't freeze, so they want to make sure that the heat comes on, right? So it doesn't drop below. So it's actually not just about energy savings anymore. It's not about just energy management. It's actually how do you use that energy in a smart way and automate and prevent loss, right? And this is where the whole, soup to nuts of solar panels, insurance, smart automations, and security and safety for these buildings become this complete ecosystem that we all should be participating in. And this is where I'm saying we all have little pictures of views of everything that's going on. And I think the next generation, and I'm gonna talk, future, building the future, is we really need to think through from everybody in this room, it's not about your one technology, it's about how the ecosystem works together, right? And making it all tied together in this beautiful building OS.
Marco, do you have a use case that's particularly exciting in Europe?
Well, we work internationally. I mean, I come from Italy, but of course the company is now based within a quarter in California, and our business is really spread worldwide. But I can just confirm what I heard from the other panelists. At the end, it's not a matter of the technology itself. It's a matter really of the cooperation in the ecosystem, and we see this with our customers. I mean, we have grown our business on, for example, wireless modules. But does it matter if it is 4G, 5G, Cat-M, LTE, high category, or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth? At the end is really a matter of finding the use case, and with our partners, we are active in smart metering, smart waste management, smart lighting, smart parking, and you name it, right? And maybe the technology underneath is always the same, but the use of it is really making the difference.
Right. Yeah, I agree with Marco a big way. I mean, Logical Building, we're an integrator. We don't create hardware, we make software through the integrations of the hardware partners. So we're partnered with Samsung. Samsung just announced here at CES a couple of days ago that their smart homes, smart things application is now Energy Star certified by the EPA. The first SHEMS, stands for Smart Home Energy Management Systems, and now a new four-letter acronym that the EPA put out. That Samsung's the first one to do that, and that's it's a big deal. Now appliances are smart. We're a partner of Samsung. We have demand management, demand response software built into their Smart Things application. So again, we're collaborating with them. But we also, and they're big on Wi-Fi, and but we can't, just do Wi-Fi. So we're connected to Comcast, and they do also LoRaWAN, and we do LoRaWAN industrial assets and being able to monitor air, water, gas, and just healthy stuff. So having partners being interoperable is really key, so it can be bespoke to each, building that's out there.
Interoperable is absolutely critical. So Matter, that there's got to be the Bluetooth for these IoT devices, or whatever you want to call it. Matter is making its way, Zigbee, we've got to create interoperability to break down the silos, and that's how we're going to get the scalability and integration.
Yeah, the jury is still out on Matter and Thread, but it's interesting to see what's going on. There's a huge presence here too, so it's good to check those things out. So to further explore the development of technology from a humans first perspective, it goes without question that diversity is a huge thing that everyone should be thinking about. So achieving the benefits of smart infrastructure doesn't coincide with enough fostering of diversity, equity, inclusion within this space. Karen, I know you're passionate about it, Scé, as well. Can you touch on these issues?
I think, again, you have these really great, I'm excited, I'm so excited about all the things that we're talking about here and all these great technology inventions, but you need to be thinking about how, if the end user doesn't have reliable internet, okay? They don't have cell service, they don't have Wi-Fi. How will they take advantage of that? If people are isolated, trying to get more ways to reduce emissions in buildings, and renters, I think that's great, but I'm sure that it's for people who are paying a certain amount of rent. So where is the incentive? Where are the policies that are incentivizing to find those opportunities? You were talking about some work that you're doing in Harlem, and I think and because you're creating opportunities for people to have choice and agency, and being more inclusive. And that transparency and building trust is going to be absolutely critical. And that's always my concern, is that we create these devices and we don't think about how they're going to be connected and how they will be interconnected, and that it's leaving communities left behind. I'm working a lot in Appalachia, in rural Appalachia, and there, it's very hilly. It's where Wi-Fi goes and internet, cell service goes to die. They're pockets of poverty, and these people are disconnected. We've got to raise the tide for all boats, and with this technology, we have that opportunity. But there's got to be an incentive, and someone's got to pay for it in some way. So I'm just hopeful that your company seems to be finding little opportunities and where there are gaps. And so I'm hoping there's more opportunities for folks to take up the charge and think about non-urban areas, thinking about suburban and rural, even tribal communities, and where there's opportunity. Because it does, not to get too philosophical, but it's really an underpinning of democracy, that if you have this disconnect between have and have not in our country, which is what we have, it's going to make things worse. It's January 6th, by the way. You didn't notice.
And I'll add to that. Actually, I think kind of like when you guys were talking about building the future is here right now, the business model actually is here right now. We actually have properties in South Dakota. We went there, and we were going to install smart locks, but the doors were in such bad condition that we couldn't install smart locks. And we were like, hey, you guys should replace the door and invest in the better door than the smart locks. However, that being said, this is one of the largest ownership groups out there. They still wanted to move forward with it because I believe it's a 2,000 unit community, lower economic community, in individual homes. And the thing that was really concerning to them is that they couldn't touch, they didn't have people to go and touch every home, right? But if they had a pipe burst, that cost them $11,000 for one pipe burst. So in one winter, they would have $200,000 of loss. And they're like, hey, I could put in a $200 thermostat that would prevent that. So for them, there is the business model. The incentive is actually in savings on insurance premiums, on loss and risk mitigation. So that's driving actually access into that. But I agree with you on the connectivity side. And this is one of the things actually, I don't know how many of you guys are into helium and anyways, a whole different topic I know there, but providing access and internet connectivity, I think that is one of the biggest challenges we had as well. Yeah.
Great. We're going to shift things up a little. Does anyone in the audience have a question based on anything that's being discussed here? Feel free to ask. You're addressing so many issues so perfectly, and there's no questions. So, okay, we're going to move on. So, the next question that we're going to pose here is how does, and Marco, I'd like you to start, how does addressing smart infrastructure impact quality of life in a municipality? And what can city officials, like developers, technology developers, keep in mind as they move to create a wellness-focused built environment?
Well, first of all, it is the capability of the smart infrastructure that really determine what the municipality can do, right? But before saying what should be done, when it comes to quality of life and these kind of things, my mind goes back to the pandemic period, right? And allow me to go back, even if it is not a nice topic, but when I'm thinking about it, I really see how we were all not ready, not prepared to face these challenges. And I'm talking about simple things. I'm talking about contacting a doctor. I mean, at least in my country, before it was normal to visit the doctor to just ask for something for a normal flu, right? But now we were not allowed to do it anymore. And so working in isolation, working from remote, not being able to see faces, to have a normal life as we were used before. And I personally, at least in the region where I live, found a lot of technological barriers also to this, right? So I think that, let's say, a black swan event like this can be really a catalyst for the innovation, because I hope that governments, municipalities, and all the stakeholders realize how important it is to invest in the digital transformation, to give an answer to simple questions of people that have to live a normal life, and something can happen that makes it different than how it was before, right? So this is my vision about how a smart infrastructure at the end is also relevant for these kind of topics of quality of life. And
That's great. Yeah, it definitely was a catalyst, COVID-19, the pandemic, and I think everyone knows that it's just a matter of time before the next one happens. So how prepared are we going to be, right?
let's use smart infrastructure for something different. Okay, next time.
Yeah.
That's hard. Let's not think about. Well, let's think about that. But for a moment, let's have a moment of breather. Hopefully, right?
Exactly.
But adding to that, I think I'm going to reframe your question, because it's not about municipalities. It's about people. Right. One of your first questions, right? And what does home mean? What does community mean to people? And I think one of the things that was lost in the pandemic was like the feeling of connectedness. And home at the fundamental for everybody is shelter. It's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the very bottom is shelter and safety. And the notion of home, though, has to change with the modern era, right? The notion, like, people move 10 times before they turn the age of 40. So, and this is, right now, we're dealing with a very, very mobile group where they're moving a lot, right? And so this is one of the things, to me, is like, the notion of home is not four walls and a roof. The notion of safety is not the way, in some ways, ADT has provided safety for a home that is static. But now, ADT is now providing safety in Uber, in DoorDash, in Lyft, and other areas. It's this notion of safety and home where you are your truest self should follow you like software layer that goes with you from place to place to place, right? And so to me, that's what we are enabling, is the new future of, like, what does home mean? What does community mean? At the fundamental of what we're doing, we're trying to reduce distance between loved ones, making it easier to connect with other people, right? And that's what, in some ways, pandemic rushed in with everybody all of a sudden learning to use Zoom. My parents learned to use Zoom. The first time I saw my parents learn how to use a mouse, it was challenging. And they learned how to use Zoom really fast because they wanted to see their grandkids, right?
Yeah, mine did not, just for the record.
But I think that's the question. It's not about making better municipalities. It's making better homes, better communities that actually go with you from place to place to place, and you have that feeling of belonging, safety, anywhere, at any economic level, at any like diversity level. That's what we need to enable.
Yeah, so we started our business, Logic Buildings, in multifamily, and I think till this day that's kind of like the battleground of innovation, because a multifamily building is essentially a smart city. The way it's configured, it's mechanical, it's electric, it's plumbing, it's garage. At the street level, you have, retail businesses. And during the pandemic, each one of those different types of, built living spaces needed to operate remotely. And you also had people that till today are living, working, and playing in their multifamily building. And multifamily buildings are adding more and more amenity spaces, whether it's a gym or it's a dog walk. There's like farming now, you grow your own kale like on a roof, and they're making water out of air, like really cool stuff is happening. And then it became like also an issue of like, do we make more parking? Is it gonna be autonomous? Do we, how do we charge those vehicles? How do we apply choice for people bringing in their people when they come to lease and rent the building today? One of the top 3 questions is, do you have electric vehicle charging? And the owner will say, why do you care? Do you have an EV? And they say, no. So why do you care? He goes, well, I might. So if I sign a lease for 2 years or 3 years, even a year, I want to know, can I park here? So a lot of like interesting issues to solve that we're involved in and solving, and it's really gratifying to see that this transformation is actually happening, and a lot of that we'll start to seeing in like pure asset classes, pure residential, pure commercial, industrial, that's coming out of this multifamily mix.
Okay, so many threads, so many things to talk about. I want to go back up to the municipal level and talking about infrastructure and talk about something that's maybe not as sexy when it comes to infrastructure, but it's monitoring and maintenance, and that's a place where we do so poorly, right? So again, I'm from Pittsburgh. We are the home of where the day that President Biden came to talk about infrastructure, a bridge collapsed. A bridge in my neighborhood collapsed. Thankfully, no one died. But the point is, it was rated poor. It was one of these. State blames the local blames state. We still don't know why it collapsed. But the point is, we have technology, actually invented at Carnegie Mellon, that is able to determine the rigidness and the effectiveness of infrastructure using drones, using FLIR type of technology and some other cool stuff. They're able to demonstrate, and artificial intelligence, able to show the health of infrastructure. It's not sexy, right? And also, who's paying for that? So a lot of times the funding at the federal level, it's for new infrastructure, new roads, but the funding is not for maintenance and monitoring. And that's something that if we talk about safety and being able to be safe and secure, you need to be able to have bridges be safe and secure, and pipes be safe and secure, and water be drinkable, and your air quality, that you can breathe. And that we need to be, and the technology, again, exists, but the incentive to use that technology is not there. The policies are not there. So again, I'm hoping, and sadly, now that one bridge fell, we're looking at other poor quality bridges and realizing that, we're gonna have to do some things. And the technology exists, but who's paying for that? Municipalities often don't have the funding to pay for that. So I guess like Maslow's basic needs, one of them is, infrastructure needs to be reliable and safe as well.
Well, those are great points. And for the audience members who are kind of new in this industry, we're going to touch a bit on business models. You touched on it briefly about who pays for it, but Jeff, Let's take a look at the different business models driving this tech transition to smart infrastructure. Things like who pays for it, what attracts the investment, which is where there's a void right now, right?
Yeah, great. And we started a business about 8 years ago before you had really high energy rates and you didn't have like ESG and decarbonization as things to drive change, which you do have now, which is great. But what we had to do back then is, and we still do to a degree, is show bottom line. You have to show a owner of real estate assets like what's in it for them, and how if I make an investment, there's capital costs to put in these smart devices. What is my return on that investment? So, the way we do it is we have a SaaS model, software as a service. There's some upstart costs for the capital to go in. Now, the IRA is going to help with that. And there's like 3 buckets of value. There's tax deductions, there's incentives, cash incentives, there's tax investment and credits. So that's going to help, drive math, get the good ROI and payback. But those are the ways to make it really easy, simple to the owner. Thank you. For an owner to just follow the bouncing ball. What do I get out of it? We will translate that into carbon reduction. If your buildings are in communities where there's carbon fines, like in New York City, they're starting in 2024. We'll lay that out as well. But it comes down to being really simple. There's an ROI. There's a way to see a payback for my investment.
Great. We're running out of time, so we're going to hit our final question here. We spoke a lot about the challenges in the industry, and we are really in the early innings. It's going to be interesting to see what the next 5 years are going to show. So starting from Marco here, what are the next trends in the built space that the audience should be watching out for, let's say in the next year or so?
Well, before I said that the technology itself is not relevant, but it is a fact that, for example, in the space where I work, for example, 5G is really the buzzword, right? And 5G started as a consumer thing, but is going to be something that we will really use with the next generation of chipset and modules that we will design, something that really will enable a lot of new use cases and with capabilities that will also allow us to implement machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all this kind of stuff that at the end will really enable all these smart infrastructures and smart cities. And you mentioned maintenance, for example, and we really believe that the Telit IoT Solutions, with also our tools for remote management and the dashboard, data collection, and so on, can really be a key for municipalities and end users to really be able to monitor and maintain all the infrastructure, because it's not just about creating, but it's a matter of sustainability also over the lifetime.
Great. We just hit the 2-minute warning, so about 45 seconds each. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to be fast. I think one of the things that I kind of went back on is that I agree that in some ways, like, technology is already there. Everything's already there. Business model, I think, is one of the things that are challenging. I also think that interoperability is one of the things that's very, very challenging. And data privacy, we're all seeing the same data. How do we actually make that all work together? And I'll go back to, like, right now, we are in this moment of invent or die. Like, with the recession coming, we're gonna have a moment of invent or die. And I wanna change this paradigm of what we say is a recession as creative destruction. This is such a great opportunity for us to take the technology that exists, take the connectivity that exists, take some of the things that are already being worked on the municipality level, and really understand the problem, right? Like you're saying, on the maintenance side, that's a huge challenge. And somebody needs to solve that. And so I'm really excited about being in this room, sharing with you guys, because I would love to know, like, what you all are working on that can solve some of these problems out there. Because for right now, a lot of the companies, the big companies, if they don't reinvent, they'll die. You're either going to be Blockbuster or Netflix. You're going to be BlackBerry or Apple iPhone. And I know I'm just running out of time. But that was one thing. I was at Palm, and I was competing against BlackBerry. Didn't see Apple coming with their touchscreen, right? Which opened up this walled garden of application marketplace that allowed any app developer to get ideas out there fast. Whoever owns that marketplace will do great, right? Okay. And I think that's where the true opportunity is right now for what we can see going forward.
Great. We see definitely a lot of cost-cutting opportunity because of the inflation, whether it's recession. Cost-cutting becomes really a big deal. So any technology that enables you to save money, really valuable. Now, the other thing that's happening is that grid services are getting paid for by utilities everywhere. Consumers, the challenge now is getting them educated on that. It's just acknowledgement of where they are. Yes, there's a lot of pockets that need to get there in the United States, but some major metropolitan markets, again, the Northeast, West Coast, and South, now have this available. And that's only going to be proving ground for other states to take note to deliver the same types of value.
So I guess my closing words, and this is the advice that I give my kids as well, is the world is becoming automated and electrified. And that's going to be really critical that as that world is developing, that we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, that we make sure that the tide is rising for all boats and there's opportunities in that as well. Those are my closing words, is electrification and automation. It's happening, and get on for it.
So on behalf of our panel here, we thank you for attending this session. We hope you got something good out of it. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, you could see at the North Hall, where smart cities and infrastructure. We wish you a great rest of the show, and be safe. Thank you.